Hey everybody, it's Michael over at Arcade92. Welcome back to our latest video. We're actually going to focus on this game right here called Death Duel on Sega Genesis. So at Arcade92 we have not just old arcade games, but we also have like retro consoles such as the NES, the Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, the original PlayStation. And for the most part, we have to use emulators for those because the machines just get broken and they're obviously irreplaceable. But about once every couple weeks or so, I'll bring in a game that's either like obscure or an actual Sega game or Nintendo game. So this time we're going to talk about Death Duel. So Death Duel is a very interesting game because it was actually invented to push the limits of violence in video games. Sega at the time wanted to differentiate themselves from Nintendo by purposely creating hyper-violent games. So a game that we could think of that achieved this is obviously like Mortal Kombat. But this game was released in 1992, just a little bit before Mortal Kombat would be released. And slightly before this one, the same company, Razorsoft, released a game called Slaughter Sport, which was definitely ahead of its time with the same level of violence that Mortal Kombat would have. So in this game actually has a lot of personal affinity to me, and I'll explain why here in a moment. But it's based in the year 2140, and you are Barrett Jade. You are a mech pilot. That's Abe's Oddworld yelling behind me there. But you're a mech pilot. And it's based in the future where there's like 9 other alien races across the universe. And rather than having a full-scale war and all the consequences that come with a full-scale war, they pick one champion from each race across the universe to battle out over territories. So in this case, you have a giant robot, and you're versing all these various aliens and their champions. So on the back of the box, it actually says here, not suggested for children under 13. And this was ahead of its time. So if today you go buy a video game, there's an ESRB rating on it. So T for teen, M for mature, E for everyone. So this predates this. This is one of the first games to actually have a disclaimer on the back that discouraged players that were too young or not mature to play the game. So where a personal connection comes to me for this game is when Razorsoft was completing this game, they needed someone to test it. They specifically wanted a 13-year-old to test it. At the time, I lived in Dallas, Texas, which is where the Arcade 92 exists here in McKinney, Texas, not too far from where I grew up. And Razorsoft was based in Oklahoma City. So in a few methods of ways, I was actually contacted to go test this game in Oklahoma City. So it is a very difficult game, and if you can actually get to the end of it and beat the game, at the very end of the game, it says special thank you to Michael. I'm that Michael. So very unique game. It's the only game that I actually tested 3 games when I was much younger, but this one actually mentions me by name at the very end of the game. So Razorsoft they really pushed the limits of violence in video games, and eventually they got into an argument with Sega over kind of a silly thing, but the cartridges that they were using for the games were not officially released by Sega, and a lawsuit ensued. And what eventually would happen is Razorsoft didn't necessarily lose the lawsuit, but it caused enough disruption in the company to where they eventually did have to close down. They made 5 games. They had 8 that were in the works, but only 5 of them were released. Another game that I hope to bring in here at some point is Slaughter Sport. And if you were to play Slaughter Sport, you would say to yourself, this is Mortal Kombat. And it was released 2 years before Mortal Kombat. So, very unique game. Razorsoft was a short-lived company, but it's actually pretty fun. It's pretty unique. Again, it's hyper-violent. In the first level, you're battling this basically dragon alien, and your job is to blow its arms off, blow its legs off, and eventually blow its head off. When you blow the enemy's head off, that's when you won. So part of the slogans on the game is a whole new meaning to disarming your enemy. So again, there's the mech robot that you're fighting with. If you're a fan of Mech Warrior, like the actual series that's been around for a long time, that franchise, you'd love this game because it is heavily influenced by that. So, all right, so Arcade 92. everything in here. We got about 101 machines in here. They're all set to free play for just 12 bucks. You can stick around as long as you want to. Obviously, these games here, even the authentic ones that are emulated, you just sit down, grab a controller, and you start playing. So y'all come out to Arcade 92. It's time to play again.